Before we start, a quick explanation. The original Who Are HB and Who Are B68 videos are blocked in Germany, Austria and some other places, so some people will have missed those uploads. It mostly surrounds footage of Jóan Símun Edmundsson, so here is a special edited version of both videos just for Germans. The rest of the videos are totally unchanged from the original, so if you've already watched them, you needn't bother. Dankeschön! Let's kick off our club roundup with the reigning champions, winning the 2020 Premier Division by 6 points and picking up the title for the 24th time, making them by far the most successful club in the country. They've also got a huge 28 Faroe Island Cups to their name, so let's have a closer look at them. This is Faroe Ball and this is HB. Their full name is Hana Boltfella. You'll see this word Boltfella a lot as we go through the teams. It is basically the Faroese equivalent of FC. Bolt means ball, Fella means club. Ball club. Han is the Faroese word for harbour, so HB quite literally means the Harbour's Football Club. They play in red and black stripes and were formed in October 1904, making them the third oldest team in the Faroe Islands. HB are based in the capital city, Tórshavn, from where they take their name. Tórshavn in Faroese means Thor's Harbour. They play at the 5,000 capacity Gundardalur Stadium, which they share with their city rivals B36. You'll find quite a few teams in the league that come from the capital region and the surrounding area, and considering the city houses 2/5 of the country's population, it's no surprise that that's where the most football is played. Gundardalur is actually home to 3 clubs, as it has an upper pitch and a lower pitch, but you'll find out more about those clubs later on. HB and B36 each have their own stand decked out in their colours, but home fans against anyone else can sit in either stand. The ground sits next door to Tórsvalla, the national stadium, where the Faroese national team play and where HB played some games in 2020 while their home ground was getting returfed. Although actually, like all Faroese grounds, it's an artificial pitch, so I'm not sure if returfed is the right word. I had the delight of watching an HB game back in 2017 and got to experience a match day at Gundardalur. It was about £8 to get in, the ticket seller had a huge Liverpool FC tattoo, and the opposition NSI fans had brought a massive drum with them and made one hell of a racket in the away end. At half time, before the players even get a chance to come off the pitch, they open the pitch to the kids, who get to have a 15-minute free-for-all kickabout on the actual playing surface. And of course, HB won the match. We can pick any of HB's 24 league titles to be their finest hour, but we won't. Instead, let's look at their European ventures, because HB are the only team from the Faroe Islands to advance past the qualifying rounds of a European competition to the first round proper. In 1993 they made their European debut against RAF Jelgava from what is now Latvia in the Cup Winners' Cup. Back in the early 90s, the Cup Winners' Cup was the second most prestigious European Cup, the equivalent of today's Europa League. HB actually lost the first leg, but the Latvian team had problems getting to the Faroe Islands for a return leg, ultimately never making it to town. HB were awarded a 3-0 win and played in the actual first round, unfortunately being knocked out 7-0 over 2 legs against Romanian side Universitatea Craiova, or something like that. Fun fact, the winners of that 1993-94 Cup Winners' Cup was Arsenal, which was, as of 2021, their most recent European trophy. 7 HB players featured in the most recent national call-ups, including long-serving goalkeeper Taita Jessen, who will play his 10th season with HB in 2021. He's made 12 appearances for the national team and is undoubtedly the national number 2 behind former Manchester City goalkeeper Gunnar Nielsen, who actually started his career at HB. Certainly one to watch up front is Andriy Benjaminson, who missed a large portion of the 2020 season injured, but at the age of just 22 and with 54 goals in the last 3 seasons, he's a driving force to the HB forward line, along with Danish striker Mikael Dahl. And if there's any fans of Hamilton Academical that are wondering what happened to your Congolese defender Delphin Chiembi, he's here now. He's safe. HB have had a number of famous Faroese faces pass through their dressing room, including the current national team talisman Jóan Símun Edmundsson, who now plays in the Bundesliga. He currently has the most caps from the current international squad, and he played at HB at the same time as overall record international cap holder Andriy Benjaminson, who spent 8 years with the club. I'll always try to flag up Faroese players who have played in Britain, and Hull City veterans might remember Julian Johnson, who played 1 season with the Tigers in the old 3rd division but left Hull after failing to settle in the town for whatever reason. I also have to give a quick mention to Hans Orlag, who helped HB win 6 league titles and 3 cups, and was also a Faroese handball champion and won 5 national badminton titles. Probably one of the best Faroese players never to get an international cap. And finally, former goalkeeper Kai Leo Johansson, who spent 20 years at HB between 1984 and 2004, and then 7 years as Prime Minister of the Faroe Islands between 2008 and 2015. Only 4 years passed between retiring from football and then leading the nation. It would be like voting in Prime Minister Leighton Baines in 2025. Oh, and do you remember that last video where I talked about the heroics of the bobble hat goalkeeper? Well, Johannesson was the goalie on the bench for that match. The reason the Faroe Islands Cup is a competition at all is entirely down to HB and their ambitious overseas travels. In 1910, they were the first team to leave the Faroe Islands and play a foreign opponent, as they ventured across the North Sea to Norway. They also came to the British Isles to play in Shetland, but it was their 1954 trip to Iceland which would create history. They returned from their Nordic neighbours with a present, a cup, and gave it to the Faroese Sports Association so they could start a football cup tournament, and 1 year later, HB immediately won it back. One unknown to the season ahead is in the manager area. Their last manager, former Norwich City legend Jens Barthel Askew, returned to Denmark after winning the double with HB. He's now at AC Orsons, who had sacked Jonas Dahl after a run of bad results, so HB went in search of a new manager and brought in Jonas Dahl. The new manager has a lot of success to build on, and it will be hard to top a double winning campaign, but they'll be tough to keep away from the top of the league. Klaksvik, NSOI and of course B36 will be looking at taking that top spot away from them, but I'm going to go for them to retain the league. So that's your comprehensive look at a team that brought the nation a cup competition, a wealth of international players and a Prime Minister. Although, remarkably, they're not the only team to produce a Prime Minister. You'll have to wait and find out who that is, but it definitely isn't our next video, last year's runners-up NSOI Runavík. Thanks for watching, throw a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time for NSOI. B68 isn't just the postcode for Oldbury, but a team in the top flight of the Faroese pyramid, which you probably expect from this channel now. Despite finishing 4th in the 2nd tier last season, the Faroe Islands promotion rules surrounding reserve teams meant that this team were eligible for a promotion playoff and beat top tier side Argia to gain promotion back to the top flight for the first time in 5 years. A former national stadium, an island games host and a football crazy community, this is Faroe Ball and this is B68 Toftir. B68 stands for Boltfelag Atta och 60, or 68 Football Club, and were formed in 1962. Not 68, as the name might suggest, but they started as a sports team and added football to their roster in 1968. Toftir is a small village next door to Runavík, and is one of the smallest places in the Faroe Islands to have a football team. They get to play their near neighbours NSOI in the league for the first time in 5 years this season, which should make for some tasty peninsular derbies. Their ground, Svangaskar, arguably contains more sporting history than any other Faroese ground, despite only opening in 1980. When it opened, it was just a gravel pitch, and it wasn't until 1984, the year B68 won the league, when they put in proper changing rooms to replace the small changing huts. A few years later, artificial grass was laid down, and in 1989 they added a running track so that they could host the Island Games, which is basically the Olympics for nations and islands that aren't quite nations. In the 1989 games, for example, Guernsey won 3 golds in archery, the Isle of Man won 6 cycling golds, and Åland and the Isle of Wight picked up golds in gymnastics. The following year, the Faroe Islands gained membership of UEFA, which made them eligible to qualify for Euro 1992, but as they had no suitable grounds, their qualifying matches were played in Sweden. The football-loving people of Toftir were determined to change that, and by the end of 1991 they'd laid a grass pitch, replaced and refurbished the stands at the ground, and brought the whole stadium up to UEFA standards, and on 20th of October 1991 the Faroe Islands played their first official game as a UEFA member in front of a home crowd. When the national stadium, the Torsvala, was opened in 1999, the national team rotated between that and the Svangerskar Stadium until the final game in Toftir, a 2-0 win over Estonia on the 7th of June 2011. For the stadium, the finest hour was packing almost 7,000 fans in to see Faroe Islands beat Malta 2-1 in 1998, which is a sizable chunk of the population of the whole country. But for B68, their glory days were in the mid-80s, where they won the league for the first time in 1984 and immediately followed it up by winning the league a second time in 1985. After a few seasons milling around the top half of the table, they'd win the league again in 1992 and qualify for the Champions League preliminary round. They got quite a tie too, being drawn against Dinamo Zagreb, but got spanked 11-0 on aggregate to end their European adventure. They have been in Europe more recently though. They made the 2004-2005 UEFA Cup after a third place finish in the league, where they were drawn against Latvian side Ventspils and lost on aggregate 11-0 again. The team were relegated from the top flight that season too, and have been yo-yoing between the top and second tier ever since. One of the brightest sparks in the current B68 crop is 22-year-old Andriy Benjaminson. He scored 21 goals in the second tier last season and was the driving force behind their promotion to the top flight, and you'd expect him to grab a few goals this season too. Also at the club is Lukas Cheslevich, who I wrongly said was at Wojcinga in an earlier video, but in the close season he moved to B68. And when you're looking to stay in the league, what better head to have in your team than the twice winner of Faroese Player of the Year? Probably the most famous face in the Faroe Islands national team is Jóan Símun Edmundsson, who played last season in the German Bundesliga with Arminia Bielefeld. Born in Toftir, Edmundson started his career with B68, notching up 10 goals in 49 games while still a teenager. This got him a move to the then championship side Newcastle United, but he failed to make a single appearance, and after returning to the Faroes, he transferred to Vejle in Denmark and then Odense, and then got his move to Germany. He's got 61 caps for the Faroe Islands, and scored one of the most celebrated goals, the one that gave the team a 1-0 win away in Greece in Euro 2016 qualifying. At the time, there was a 169 place difference in rankings between the countries, making it statistically the biggest international upset ever. With B68 finishing almost mid-table in the second tier last season and then coming up through the playoff, it will be a struggle for them to stay there. I've got them finishing bottom, but I'm more than happy for them to prove me wrong. And that's the full table and how it definitely won't look, because I'm useless at predicting things. We've been through all the Premier League teams, but we're not stopping yet. Come back soon for a deep dive into the second tier with last year's relegation playoff losers, Argia.